Hi, good evening everyone. It's Tanja from Tanja Kraus Horsemanship here, and you are joining, you're not Tanja babe, you are joining me for Wednesday Night Live on Friday because we have special guests here, Phil Monaghan, Hakima Afrino, and we are also live on Phil's page as well, so you'll be able to see us on either of the pages, and hopefully both of them are working pretty well. I know the Tanja Kraus Horsemanship one's definitely working because I can see all the green light ups that's saying that everyone's logging on to watch.
I don't like that many green buttons.
Well, no one
likes me.
Everyone's logging on the Tanja Kraus Horsemanship page first. So, good evening and welcome everyone. What we thought we'd do tonight is just we asked you guys for some questions, and we've had a few. We've had a few sent in, which we're really looking forward to answering. And it's probably going to be a bit of a collaboration. We're just going to jump in and answer questions and things like that. So let's get right into it. We've got a few different topics tonight. So the first one, I thought we might get started with a pretty straightforward one, pretty easy one. We've had a lady send in a question about desensitizing her horse to a thermometer to getting her temperature taken. So I know that the lady is an endurance rider, and that's a requirement of taking your horse's temperature in the 3 or 4 days leading up to the ride, and then at the ride the horses have to have their temperature taken. And I know that this is a really sensitive little mare, and I know that she's an Arab mare as well, so she's a chestnut as well, so she's got everything going for her. And I'm assuming that Kerry would not have sent the question in unless she's already experienced a little bit of difficulty in this regard. So what do you reckon? What would you start with? Phil, where would you go? What's your first sort of go-to on that?
Well, the first thing I'd do is make sure I've got my horse desensitised to me being around its back end. So I'd make sure that I can pick up all its feet, I can pat it, I can basically pat it over the tail, pat it over the rump and everything else, and even pick up its tail and pat it on the butt. Make sure that you can touch all that area first. The last thing I'd do is want to, it's Friday, I've got to check the thermometer, walk out, lift up the tail and jam a thermometer in there. You got to prepare. So if you get the horse used to you being around that area, then this problem may never arise. But if you just walk up and,
try and get the job done, then the problem could arise. So I'd just basically look at just basic desensitisation of the whole horse, including that area. I think sometimes we desensitise our horses, but we only do the bits that we work with most of the time. Yep. So we pick up their front feet to stretch them out when we put the saddle on. We desensitise them around the head when we put the bridle on. We desensitise them around the girth area and the back when we put the saddle on, but the only time anyone goes near the back end is when the trimmer or farrier turns up. So, addressing that first, that would be my go-to, and I would hazard a guess and say that if you did that, the problem would probably disappear. Yeah, definitely. It's kind of along the lines of, you guys would have heard me say it at clinics about 1 million times, and Phil probably says it in his clinics as well. What we really have to think about is what happens before what we want to happen happens, and you can take that, you can break anything down into, you could break it down into 100 steps if you needed to, and some horses don't need you to break it down into 100 steps. You walk up, you rub them down the hindquarter, you lift up the tail, they go, yep, no worries, yep, no worries, yep, no worries, and you've got the thermometer in there. But then some horses, you're going to walk down beside them and they're going to go, oh, no. Why are you walking down beside me? And then you're going to put a hand on their rump and they're going to scoot and they're going to go, oh, oh. So the horse is going to tell you the exact moment where she's not comfortable anymore. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things we see in just basic approach of our horses. The human always gets task focused. Yeah. The human always goes, I want you on the trailer. I want to be able to put a thermometer on you. I want to be able to give you an injection. And we get so focused on that we create an issue out of it instead of thinking, well, before I put a thermometer there, I need to be able to walk down beside my horse, pick up its tail comfortably, not the tail tight and the horse scooching under, nice and relaxed and everything like that. So I'd be just spending time back there and brushing the tail and things like that.
And if when I say, oh, you want to brush the horse's tail, if you're thinking to yourself, I don't want to go back there because she kicks, there's your problem. Yeah. There's no way you're getting near her with a thermometer if she's already reacting to you merely being behind her.
The problem isn't the thermometer, the problem is the horse kicks.
Or the problem is that the horse doesn't like you at that end.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So hopefully that helps, Kerry. Let us know how you're going with that one. The second one is a question from Anna in regards to retraining a horse that has a really active flight instinct, specifically around ropes and things like that. Like there might be a rope on the ground, or when a rope touches him, or when something catches him by surprise, the horse definitely, he's got a really big flight response, so he goes run then think. And of course we know that that's a completely natural behaviour of a horse, but this lady's been working with this horse, she rides this horse, he is an off-the-track thoroughbred, but she has owned him for quite some time, and I know that this is a pretty big issue for her and him, to the point where I think he can be quite dangerous on the ground, because she never really knows, well, if the neighbour, cuts down a tree, he's going to be gone, and I'm going to be knocked over or something like that. So, what are you thinking in regards to helping a horse like this that's got that really active flight response?
There's sort of two parts to this. One thing I've noticed over the years is when horses, they might come from a very excitable environment, and then they go into an environment that is a little bit more. It's like building a culture. If you build a culture amongst your horses, or if your horse herd has got a culture of being relaxed, a new horse that comes into that herd will be relaxed. But if your horse herd has a culture of being a little bit erratic and a little bit flight, then that horse will adopt that culture as well. We've had a few horses over the years that have come to us that have been really flight oriented, and then before long they're just standing in the mob with everyone else because they've learned that it's not that big of a deal. And I think part of it's a cultural thing. We need to develop a culture where it's a culture of relaxation. It's a culture of, oh, what are you bolting for, dude? We don't do that here. A relaxed culture, and I think that's a big part of it. The other thing is that if I do have a horse like that and I've got them under saddle, I basically teach them to... I get them in my corridor, and I teach them that my corridor is where they need to be. So if they shy in place. And I don't want to take that instinct away from my horses where they react to something, because that's their survival. They need to react to things. It sort of almost disheartens me to see horses so desensitized that they actually end up in danger. So they've got to be... able to still recognise danger and respond to it in a natural way. But when we're around as humans, it sort of changes the rules a bit, because they're, 10 times our weight and 10 times our strength, so we can get hurt. So we need to teach them that we're there as their leader, and that they can trust us, and that also, that, like I say, to shy in place. So
I think it's... just on that note as well, I think it's my job to shy.
Yeah.
So you don't need, if the horse truly respects you as the leader, then really he shouldn't be making those decisions himself so much. Of course, they're all individuals, and definitely when we watch our herd, someone might pop their head up and sort of have a little bit of a look or a shy, but, I always use Galliano as a perfect example of a horse that came to us that, should we call her the giraffe? She's always looking, she was always spooking, she was always, stimulated externally. And as Bill said, our horses have an amazing culture of just, they're relaxed, they're like, what are you worried about? They're very secure in their own herd and in their own confidence levels. And so that rubbed off on Galliano. So now she's still the looker. She still has got her head up in the air, but her feet aren't following that movement anymore.
She's nowhere near like she used to be. She's really starting to relax.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, we're seeing a physical change with her as part of that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. A couple of practical things that I just jotted down. Anna, I know that you said that you've done a lot of desensitization with this horse. One thing that I would be very careful of in regards to desensitization. You mentioned that he's pretty good about desensitization, especially when he knows that it's you doing it. So what I feel like he's maybe getting into a mindset of is, she's bringing out the rope, she wants me to stand here, and that's what I'm going to get rewarded for. And so he's learning a pattern of behavior, which we want to teach them, but he's learning it within a skill set. So he's not actually becoming confident with the rope or becoming confident with or not scared of the rope anymore. He's learned a behavior that gets him left alone, or that gets you to stop flinging the rope around. Gets the release. And so he's not actually, he looks like he's desensitized to it, but he's not. He's just going, okay, if I just stand here and tolerate it, then she's going to leave me alone. So one of the things that you can do that's going to help unlock that mindset in him is actually get him to move his feet. So when I've got horses that are like this, that are like, yep, I'm just going to stand here and I'm not even going to look at the rope and you're going to leave me alone because that's what you do, I will actually start to lunge them or walk them around in a circle and drag the rope along beside them, because moving their feet, it is a lot more difficult for them to shut down or do that behaviour where they're ignoring it once their feet are moving. That it unlocks a completely different part of the brain. So once the feet are moving, I think you'll find that if you drag the rope beside him, he'll be like, oh no, I'm really scared of that rope, and then you can help him through that process. Another thing that I wrote down, and this is because I know Anna and we were having a conversation about this horse the other weekend, I think you need to build his confidence in other areas, just generally a couple of things you said. I know that we were sitting like under a shelter and you mentioned that there was no way that he would get under the shelter. He was completely frightened of, like, even when your other horses go into the feed shed and are eating in the feed shed, that he is frightened of going into the feed shed. So this isn't about ropes as much as it's just a complete lack of confidence on his part altogether. So I think it's going to be a real umbrella approach in regards to helping this horse build his confidence. And the number 3 thing, and I'm probably going to use this topic as a whole, Wednesday night live, because there's a lot of things that we can do for this horse. But the 3rd thing is don't sneak around him.
No. Don't sneak around your horses.
So we know that for certain things are going to trigger them. And what the horse has done is that they actually teach us to be really nice and quiet. And I know, Anna, you've got a beautiful daughter who goes to the horses and things like that with you, and I don't know whether you do this or not, but I know that I've seen people sort of say, oh, be quiet, you don't want to scare the horse, and don't ride your bike, I don't want you to scare the horse, and don't do this. Let her run around, let her friends run around, all that sort of stuff, because the more surprising stimulation that he gets externally that doesn't actually hurt him or doesn't result in anything going wrong, the better off he's going to be in building his own confidence in that regard. So they're just 3 tips.
You've got to build that. Like, you wouldn't go out in the paddock and start banging tambourines together or anything, but you're going to build that. And if you have been sneaking around your horse, and we're not saying anyone has at all, but if that's a culture that you've got or something you were brought up with, and we were all brought up with a lot of stuff that we've had to lose on this horsemanship journey, if you were brought up with that, gird him up real slow and move slow and do this and sneak around sort of a attitude, you've got to reintroduce that. But when I'm with my horses and Tanya's with her horses and we're at home, we just do what we've got to do. We go out in the paddock and we drive cars and start chainsaws and stuff like that, and they stick their head up occasionally and go, oh, what's that? And it's no big deal to them because we just go about it. And I think also if we invest in it, then it becomes a problem. Sometimes what happens is we do things emotionally. So the horse might shy at the lead rope. And the horse shied at the lead rope, and then we get all excited and we go, oh no, what's going on? And the horse goes, told you the lead rope was bad. If your horse shies or does something, sort of
ignore it.
Stay calm.
Yeah.
Ignore it and just go, hey buddy, what's your problem? What's that for? It's all right. And if you do that, then the horse soon learns that, oh, okay, that was no big deal. But if the horse shies and then you go, and get all excited about it, then the horse goes, oh, see, I told you. So that's something to take on board as well.
Yeah, absolutely. next question is from Sarah, and she sent in, horses have different personalities, they've got different natures, and they've got different abilities. What are the main things that we have found that we change when we work with different horses? Like, what are the main things that we probably change?
I don't change a lot, but I change, like some horses you need to be a little bit louder. Some horses you can be very, like you've got to really dial it down. I think that as long as you take in mind where your horse is at and you observe where your horse is and feel where your horse is and you can make the adjustments, that's what it's all about. So I think that when we follow the concept of starting as soft as we need to, being as affirming or making sure we get done what we want to get done, so being as firm as we need to, but then going back to that as soft as we can be, then it sort of takes care of itself. You know, some horses, you know, I've seen teaching clinics and that, I've seen really sensitive horses that are with people who've been used to really heavy horses, and they're having trouble. They're having a lot of trouble because they haven't learned to dial it down. And then I've seen the other side of it. I've seen people who have had really sensitive horses and horses that you think lope and you're there, and then they've got onto horses that are fairly dull that you've got to do a bit more work with, and you've got to support them a bit more, and they can't get anything done, and they think the horse is a bit silly. And it's like us. Some people feel the cold more than others. Some people feel the heat more than others. Some people, you know, are more ticklish than others, and horses are the same. They have a different ability to feel, and that's how we communicate with them, through feel. And so we've got to just dial it up, dial it down, but make those observations. Think about how we're doing it. So for me, it's less technical. I don't really technically do much different, like as far as technique-wise goes, but the way I approach it is much different.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that 100%. And one of the words that Phil just used was observation. So I think that one of the things that we have to be really conscious of in regards to horsemanship is that we are really trying to conduct ourselves in an observational, conversational way with our horses and with the horses that we're working with. So what that means is that we're constantly watching the horse to see where the horse is at, how much the horse is understanding, what the horse's attitude is, and then we're going to adjust in regards to that. So, and you might, one of the things that I find that I would change is probably, I said earlier in regards to the thermometer, you could break the thermometer down into 100 steps, but some horses might only need 3 steps or 1 step, and you're doing the temperature. Some might need 150 steps. So for me, it's just about how much do I need to break this down for this horse. As Phil said, it's also different levels of pressure. Some horses might not respond to a feather touch. Some horses might need a little bit more hand pressure or something like that. It's about understanding what they're going to respond to, what they're comfortable with, and maybe assessing an attitude. Some horses, they might be grumpy or something like that. You're going to operate on a different level with a horse that is worried versus grumpy versus happy versus distracted versus nervous versus whatever. So I think as long as you're trying to observe the horse and you're trying to figure out where he's coming from and why he is presenting the things that he's presenting to you, or why he is doing something versus why he's not doing something, I think you'll be well and truly on the path to knowing how to change your application. As Phil said, it's not really about different techniques, because you're still going to be asking the horse the same way or the same technique and using the same language, but it's about the conversation. And I guess it's the same as kids, right? I mean, you teach a lot of kids and things like that. Some kids are going to get it real quick, and some kids you might need to say it in a different way, or
just give them time.
Give them time.
Like some horses, and physically, mentally, some horses are far more athletic, some aren't, some are a little bit smarter, some aren't. And you've just got to work with what you've got. If you've got a new skill or a new task or a new cue you want to introduce it and give it time. Don't be in a rush. Like, it doesn't have to happen today, but make sure you set it up so that the horse is closer to what you want to achieve for tomorrow. You know, there's no rush with this. And if you take that approach and you back off and you just let the horse progress at their pace, then things tend to speed up. You know,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah. What do we? Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast.
Slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Okay, so our final question of the evening is all about the herd. So it comes from Beth, and Beth sent in a question saying that she's got a mare. I can't remember how old the gelding is, but a relatively close to adult gelding, and then a junior gelding. And she's wanting to put these horses together. I think she may have put these horses together, and things are a bit rambunctious. You know, the mare's getting attention, so she's coming into season and playing up to the geldings. The geldings are fighting for her attention, and she's saying, someone said to me the fastest way to ruin a good gelding is to put it in with the mare, and she wanted to know if we shared that opinion, and Phil's obviously shaking his head already. And so she wanted to know about herd dynamics and whether they can actually hinder our horse-human relationships. Well, this is the pattern.
All right.
I'm happy to answer.
The first thing is the whole idea that putting a gelding in with mares will ruin a good gelding. I disagree with that wholeheartedly. And for every old timer that's had a saying like that, there's another old timer that said, "Oh, you've got a gelding. Best thing you'll do is put him in with some mares."
Yeah.
I know that I've had and experienced over the years a few geldings that were a little bit, riggy but not rigs, so they weren't capable of serving or anything like that, but they just behaved a little bit riggy. And one of the quickest ways to sort of sort them out was put them with some old mares, because the mares went, hang on mate, you've got nothing, and it really helps them be geldings rather than thinking they're still colts. So I disagree with that saying. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with running geldings and mares together. We do at home. We've got 10 horses in our paddock, geldings and mares all running together. Now, there's a few scratches and scrapes now and again, but one thing we've noticed recently is we've just reintroduced 3 more horses into that herd, horses that have been elsewhere, and the herd's actually better now. The herd has got to a larger number of horses, and now they're better. The herd's more settled. And one thing we've noticed over the years is that our horses that we bring in sometimes and we're working on a regular basis, we'll bring them in and we'll have them in a smaller yards, half-acre yards at home. And it's not long before they start to look and feel a little bit depressed. And you put them out with the herd, with the mob, and they cheer up. They feel better. They look better. They're designed to be in a herd situation. The herd dynamics generally look after themselves. Having said that, a bigger herd usually works, and it's good to have a cross-section. If you've got 2 real old horses and you put a young horse in there, then that can be an issue, because the young horse wants to play all the time and the old horse is not so much. So when you've got a small herd, that I think can be a little bit prickly.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
a hard one, and you've got to play it by ear. If you put them in there and if they're not settling after about a day, then you've got to look at something else, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an awesome question timing wise, because we have just gone through this. So we used to run a bachelor herd, so all boys, worked beautifully. They play together, they run together, they carry on, happy, super wonderful, excellent herd. Then we had Cooper, my horse, who thinks he's a stallion but isn't one, and we had him running with 4 or 5 mares. Very good herd, not as good as the bachelor herd, because they, when the girls come into season, they kind of start scrapping over the one boy, and then I thought it was a really good herd, but now that I've seen this herd we've got 5 boys and 5 girls in this herd, it's exponentially better. It's gone another 50% on that, and I would have thought we had I would have said to people, and you guys have probably heard me say it at clinics, oh, my horses are super happy and it's awesome and everything works really well. and now it's working like super awesome well. So you know, one thing that you do have to have is as big a paddock as you can get, because they need the room to get away. If arguments begin to happen, that they need to be able to get far enough away. We have had several occasions where horses have been in too small paddocks to get away, and it has resulted in significant injury. No one died, but definitely we've had a couple of horses really badly beaten up because they just couldn't get far enough away. So that's, you know, number one. If I'm trying to give Beth some practical advice here to really monitor and think, well, what do I need? So rule number one, make sure they've got enough space to get away from each other.
Our horses are in a 35-acre paddock, so if they need to be away elsewhere, they can. And when you introduce a new horse, the hierarchy gets established, and, you know, there might be a couple of mares, a couple of geldings that tolerate being around each other, but then when, you know, when they feel like it, especially the mares, I find they just go, all right, you go away, and they just send them away, and they've got to have somewhere to go. If they've got nowhere to go, or if they've got somewhere where they can get cornered, then that's no good. You've got to have a nice big paddock, and, you know, if you were going to put 5 horses in a 1-acre paddock, I probably wouldn't suggest that. You know, that'd be a different deal. We've got 36 acres, one big 36-acre paddock, and they can get away from each other, so it works.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Number 2 on that would be, in our experience now, well, when you're talking about a mixed herd, the bigger the number of horses, the better. That's our experience right now. So we were running 2 herds, one with 1 male and 4 females, and one with 4 or 5 males. And so those 2 smallish herds were working and running quite well. But when we put all of these geldings in with this big mob, it seems to be, as you know, they're calmer, they're happier, they're spreading out way more. They used to graze within kind of an acre or so of each other. Now that, you know, they'll be 3 or 4 acres apart, but they obviously feel really safe because the whole herd is kind of like everyone's on their acre, but then in the evenings they all sort of come together and, you know, get safe because there might be wild dogs around or something like that. So I think Beth has got 2 geldings and 1 mare, and I think that might be a little bit skewed, especially if you're going to have multi and 1, I'd be doing multiple mares and 1 male as opposed to 1 mare for 2 males to fight over. Because the mare's not really going to fight over 1 male, because nature says we would have 1 stallion and 5 or 6 mares or 10 mares or 20 mares or whatever. So nature tells mares to share, whereas geldings don't share. So if you've only got 1 mare, they're going to kind of fight over that 1 mare.
If you've got a younger gelding and an older gelding, there's going to be that, the younger horse coming up to the older horse saying, you know, I'm the boss now, or at least testing the waters, and vice versa. And the older gelding say, no, this is my spot, you know. And so that'll change as well. So you've got to keep an eye on that. Like the 2 geldings, 1 mare dynamic probably isn't ideal. If it was 2 mares and 1 gelding, that'd be a different story. But 2 geldings and 1 mare, you know, it can work. I've seen it work in plenty of places. But, you know, I would suggest having them with a safe fence, like an electric fence or something, so they can't get through it, nose to nose for a while, so they can maybe sort it out a bit. But, you know, even it's something you've got to watch. And like I said, there's no rule. There's no real...
No. And like Phil said, really within the first couple of days, like all of ours have got little kick marks and little bite marks and all that sort of stuff. That's going to happen in the first couple of days. If they're still coming out with big kick marks and welts a week later, they're probably not going to settle because it looks like they're still arguing. Or they're in too small a paddock for the alpha horse to decide that the younger horse like has submitted because the younger horse can't get far enough away, and all those kind of dynamics. I mean, we could really go into this. This is kind of one of those topics where we could keep on talking. But so let the horses tell you if they've settled, and you know, I mean, I'm not little bites here and there. I mean, you know, our horses are going to do that forever because the boys bite each other just when they're playing. But if it's violent, like if it's still really violent after a couple of days, then I would be looking to either add more horses to that mob and really seeing if they could settle down. Like 3, they say 3's a crowd, right?
Yeah.
So 3's probably a crowd. I'd be looking to put a couple of extras in there and at least bumping it up to probably 5 horses, and they're going to be able to sort themselves out a little bit easier. And if they need to, they'll break away and form a couple of herds within one big herd.
Yeah.
So I hope that helped. I know we didn't touch on it, but there was a couple of tips in there. We didn't go as deep as we could. Like I say, we could probably do that as a whole topic one night. So
there's so many variables in that situation.
Yeah,
it's not
absolutely.
funny. Like if you had 2 old geldings that were sort of really established as geldings, there's a good chance they'd be off in one corner of the paddock and leave the mare alone. But if you've got a young gelding in there, he's probably going to look to establish his turf.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I can see that there's a few comments coming up, so I can't actually read them from this distance, but I will definitely answer them in the comments. So just to recap the herd, in our experiences so far, mixed herd is absolutely fine. The bigger the paddock, the better off that they're going to be. The bigger the herd, the better off that they're going to be. And even if that means, I know a lot of you guys are on agistment and things like that, talk to your agistment buddies and go, hey, do you want to run them all in my paddock for 2 weeks and then we'll rest my paddock and put them in your paddock for 2 weeks? I mean, maybe you'll have people that are willing to, come to that kind of party. We've always said a happy horse has scars on it. And what we mean by that is they're mutually grooming, they're playing, they're fighting, they're nipping at each other. That's their life. That's what they're meant to do. If you want a pristine, unblemished horse, then you go buy a dog and, have a dog.
The other side of that is, like, obviously we don't want our horses getting damaged, but my experience has been that horses that are used to running in a herd, that happens way less.
Yep.
If you get a horse that's been locked up his whole life in a box or a small paddock or whatever, and then put in a herd, he usually gets barked up pretty bad. But, he usually needs a kick in the bum too, because they're usually a little bit antisocial, and they're the horses that we usually have trouble with. Something I notice is when there's a healthy herd, is we're talking about that horse-human relationship earlier on, we tend to have less troubles with them because they're being told that they're not that special occasionally in the herd.
Yeah.
Whereas if we're their only interaction and we're pulling them out and patting them and grooming them and telling them they're awesome all the time, they tend to want to take advantage of that sometimes.
Actually, I'm so glad that you brought that up, Phil, because the other question was, can a herd hinder the human-horse relationship? And I would say absolutely not.
The other way.
I think it's the other way. One, for the reason that Phil just said, but 2, a happy horse is a horse that's happy to see you. And, that goes for human relationships as well. A person that's not happy at home isn't the nicest person to work with. They're not the nicest person to go have drinks and dinner with, and vice versa.
They're not happy at work.
They're not happy at work. They're not happy at home. It works everywhere. You tend to carry, your experiences of your life everywhere you go. And horses are the same. If they're unhappy in the paddock, they're going to come out and they're going to be unhappy with you and nipping and kicking and putting their ears back and all sorts of stuff. If they're happy in the herd, they're going to be like, hey, you're coming to see me. What are we going to do for an hour? And then I get to go back with my herd. We haven't even touched on the whole nature thing of, that's where they feel safe. And we've got, we've had horses with all sorts of problems because they've not been in herds. We've dealt with a horse that was a self-mutilator before. We've dealt with horses that, have terrible habits like wind sucking and pacing and weaving and all those kind of things. All that, it doesn't exist if your horse is running in a herd.
It's amazing how quick it disappears when they're in a mob too.
Absolutely. Nature has them in a herd, so that's what we always need to come back to, I feel like.
Yeah, 100%.
So, thank you so much for joining us for Wednesday Night Live on Friday with our special guest, Phil. Thank you so much. On the Gold Coast we are. Thanks so much, guys. Stay tuned into Tanja Kraus Horsemanship Facebook page over the weekend, because I'll be coming at you with little tidbits. We're up on the Gold Coast to attend a Empower Summit, which I'm really excited about learning, and I'm going to share with you what I've been getting out of it for sure, and Phil might even do it on his page as well, the Phil Monaghan Hakeem Afrino page. Thank you so much for sending your questions in, guys. We could not have done the evening talk without you. We hope that you have a wonderful Friday night and a fantastic weekend with your horses, and we will answer the comments over the next 24 hours or so. Thank you so much.
Sorry, my battery went flat.
Yeah, good night,